Hey, I'm Emma. I work from home as a web designer and life's been pretty good. My parents left me a decent inheritance, and I've been pretty stable financially. My best friend, Lily, is a bit of a character. She's all about astrology and is always reading star charts and horoscopes. I've never really bought into it, but she swears by it. One day, Lily comes over, all excited. "Emma, you have to see this," she says, waving some papers around. "What's got you so hyped?" I ask, rolling my eyes a bit. "I did your natal chart and found your perfect match. His name is Matt, and he's absolutely your soulmate," she says, eyes sparkling. I couldn't help but laugh. "Alright, fine. I'll meet him. But if he's a weirdo, you owe me a drink." "Deal," she grins, clapping her hands. So, Lily arranges a meetup. I'm feeling a bit skeptical, but curious. When I finally meet Matt, he turns out to be surprisingly normal. Tall, dark hair, a nice smile, nothing like the disaster I pictured. "Hey, I'm Matt," he says, extending his hand. "Emma, so, you're into astrology too?" I ask, trying to make conversation. He laughs, shaking his head. "Not really. Lily wouldn't stop bugging me about this, so I figured why not?" I chuckle. Same here. I was half expecting some crystal ball guy. We end up talking for hours. Turns out, we have a lot in common. We both love hiking, we're into the same movies, and we even like the same weird food combinations. I'm starting to think maybe there's something to this astrology thing after all. A few days later, we're texting nonstop. Matt seems genuinely interested in getting to know me. He asks about my work, my hobbies, and my family. We keep seeing each other, and things get serious pretty fast. Matt is kind, funny, and seems genuinely interested in me. One night, after a cozy dinner at his place, he takes my hand. "Emma, I know it's only been a few months, but I feel really connected to you. I don't want to rush things, but I can't see myself with anyone else," he says, looking into my eyes. I feel a flutter in my chest. "I feel the same way, Matt. You're everything I didn't know I was looking for." A few weeks later, we're officially a couple. Lily is over the moon. "I told you the stars don't lie," she exclaims when I tell her. As time goes on, Matt and I get closer. We start talking about the future, and he brings up the idea of me moving in with him. It feels right, so I agree. We're happy, and for once, everything feels perfect. Matt had convinced me that investing my inheritance in our home was better than stocks. Life had been pretty smooth after I paid off his $200,000 mortgage. With the leftover money, I gave the house a facelift, new furniture, a fresh coat of paint, the works. We were settling in nicely. One afternoon, Matt's phone rang, and he answered it, looking concerned. "Mom? What's going on?" I could hear his mom's frantic voice on the other end, though I couldn't make out the words. Okay, calm down. We'll be there as soon as we can," Matt said, hanging up the phone. He turned to me, his face pale. "Dad's had a stroke. He's paralyzed on his left side. We need to go, Emma." We packed quickly and hit the road. The drive was tense, with Matt gripping the wheel, barely saying a word. When we arrived at his parents' house, the place was in chaos. Susan, his mom, was in tears, and her back was acting up. "Matt, Emma, thank God you're here," Susan cried out, her face streaked with tears. "Your father, he can't move or talk, and my sciatica. I can't do anything." After a long, exhausting visit to the hospital, we got the details. George, Matt's dad, was in bad shape. He couldn't move his left side and couldn't speak. It was heartbreaking to see him like that. Back at the house, we needed a plan. "We should think about a care facility," I suggested. "They can provide the best care for George." "No. He doesn't want that. He wants to be at home," Susan snapped, looking furious. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Alright, what about hiring a nurse then? Someone who can be here around the clock." Susan shook her head, her eyes filling with tears again. We can't afford that. We're running out of money. Matt looked at me, clearly pleadingly. Emma, we have to do something. Mom can't handle this alone. I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. I can stay here for a while and help out. I work from home, so I can manage. It's not ideal, but we'll make it work. The next day, Matt and I set up a room for George downstairs, so he didn't have to deal with stairs. Susan was hovering, barking out instructions and complaints. This bed is too small. How is he supposed to be comfortable in this? She grumbled. It's what we have right now, Susan. We'll find something better soon, I said, my patience wearing thin. Finally, we got George settled in and comfortable. It was a relief to see him resting, even though he couldn't express it. The next morning, Matt had to head back to our city for work. Once Matt left, reality hit hard. But I was determined to help George recover and support the family, no matter how hard it got. Living with Matt's parents was a real grind. Susan's sciatica had her stuck in her chair, leaving me to take care of George and the whole house. She didn't lift a finger and always had something to complain about. Nothing I did seemed good enough for her. Emma, this soup is too salty, Susan grumbled one evening as I served dinner. It's the same recipe I always use, Susan, I replied, trying to keep my cool. Doesn't look like it. And you're always on that computer. You should be taking care of us, not just sitting around, she added, her tone sharp. I took a deep breath. I'm working, Susan. I need to keep my job to help with the expenses here. Work? It looks like you're just goofing off on that thing, she muttered, rolling her eyes. I swallowed my frustration and went to check on George. He couldn't speak, but his eyes followed me, showing a silent gratitude. It was tough seeing him like this, but I was determined to help him improve. I'll give you a massage now, George, I said softly, setting up the massage table. He blinked slowly, a small sign that he understood. I had recently finished a course in massage therapy to better care for him. As I worked on his muscles, I noticed he seemed to relax a bit. It was the only time he looked somewhat comfortable. A couple of months passed this way. Every day was a struggle to balance work and caregiving, with Susan's constant complaints in the background. Finally, after months of this routine, Susan's sciatica improved enough that she decided to visit Matt for a few months. Emma, I'm going to stay with Matt for a while. I need a break from this place, she announced one morning. I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. That's great, Susan. I'm sure it will be good for you. As she packed her bags, I couldn't help but feel a sense of freedom creeping in. It would be just George and me, and I could finally set my own routine without her constant nagging. The day Susan left, I felt like I could breathe again. I went to George's room, and he gave me a look that said more than words ever could. It's just us now, George. We're going to make some real progress, I said, smiling at him. He blinked slowly, and I knew he was on board. With Susan out of the house, life became a lot more manageable. I set up a solid routine for George and me. Every morning, I'd start by helping him with his exercises. I'd lift his legs and arms, encouraging him to move as much as he could. I'd then move on to massaging his muscles, something I'd learned from my recent therapy course. This will help with the stiffness, George. Just hang in there, I'd tell him, working through the knots and tight spots. The days were long, but without Susan's constant nagging, I could focus better. My web design work became my escape, a few hours a day where I could lose myself in creativity. One afternoon, as I was setting up for George's therapy, I noticed something different. His fingers were twitching slightly. Hey, George, can you try moving your fingers for me? I asked, holding my breath. Slowly, very slowly, his fingers curled a bit. It wasn't much, but it was the first movement I'd seen in weeks. I felt a rush of excitement. That's great, George. Keep going, just like that, I encouraged him. His eyes lit up with a spark of hope. From that day on, we worked even harder. Every little twitch, every small movement was a victory. I started incorporating more exercises, pushing George to do a bit more each day. The weeks passed, and George's improvement was steady. One day, as I was helping him stand, he managed to take a step with some support. "Look at you, George. You're walking," I exclaimed, almost jumping with joy. Our daily routines became more rigorous. We'd walk a few steps every day, and George's confidence grew with each one. His strength was returning, slowly but surely. One evening, after a particularly good session, I decided to sit down and have a chat with him. "George, you're really making amazing progress. How are you feeling about all this?" I asked, sitting next to him. He took a deep breath and managed to say, "Better, thanks, Emma." Hearing him speak, even if just a few words, was like music to my ears. "You're welcome, George. We're a team, and we're going to get through this together," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. As the months rolled on, George continued to improve. He was now able to move around the room with some assistance, and could feed himself with a bit of help. Our bond grew stronger through this journey. We shared more conversations, even if they were simple and slow. "George, you're really a fighter. I'm so proud of you," I said one morning as we sat in the garden, enjoying the fresh air. "Couldn't do it without you," he replied, his words clearer than before. We both sat there, enjoying the moment. It felt good to see him reclaiming parts of his life that had seemed lost forever. His spirit was strong, and his determination was inspiring. Over time, George and I grew very close. He started calling me his daughter, which warmed my heart. One day, we were sitting in the garden, enjoying the sunshine, when I decided to ask something that had been on my mind. "George, why didn't you want to go to a nursing home when you got sick?" I asked gently, looking into his eyes. He looked surprised. "Never said no," he replied slowly. "Saved money for good place." I was taken aback. "But Susan said you didn't want to go, and that there wasn't any money for it." George frowned, a serious look crossing his face. "Didn't know that," he said, his voice firm despite the struggle to speak. "We'll figure out." After months away, I decided to surprise Matt with a visit home. I was excited, thinking about how happy he'd be to see me. I packed my bags, said a quick goodbye to George, and hit the road. The drive felt longer than usual, my mind racing with thoughts of reuniting with Matt. When I finally pulled into our driveway, it was already dark. I grabbed my bags and walked up to the front door, but something felt off. My key didn't fit the lock. Confused, I tried again, but it was no use. I rang the doorbell, hoping Matt would answer, and this would all make sense. A woman I didn't recognize opened the door. "Can I help you?" she asked, looking puzzled. "I'm Emma, Matt's wife. This is my house. Who are you?" I replied, feeling a knot forming in my stomach. "I'm Karen. This house was sold a couple of months ago. I'm just here to keep an eye on it," she shot back. My mind went blank for a second. "Sold? That's impossible. This is my home." "I'm sorry, but it's not anymore," she said, looking genuinely sorry. I fumbled for my phone, my hands trembling. I dialed Matt's number, my heart racing. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, Emma, what's up?" he said, his voice sounding oddly calm. "Matt, I'm at our house, and some woman says it's been sold." "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking. He sighed, a cold edge in his voice. "Yeah, I sold the house. I bought a new one for Mom and me." "What? You sold our house without telling me? Where am I supposed to go?" I shouted, feeling a mix of anger and confusion. "There's no place for you in the new house, Emma. I sent the divorce papers. Didn't you get them?" he replied, his tone icy. I felt like the ground was falling away beneath me. "Divorce papers? Are you serious, Matt? I paid off your damn mortgage. How could you do this to me?" He laughed, a cruel sound. "You can't prove any of that. The house was in my name. It's over, Emma. Move on." Tears stung my eyes as I tried to process his words. What about your father? Who's taking care of him? Dad? He's not my problem anymore. Mom and I don't need him dragging us down. If you want to play nurse, take him. I don't care, Matt said coldly, hanging up the phone. I stood in the parking lot of what used to be my home, the darkness surrounding me, feeling utterly lost. My conversation with Matt had left me dumbfounded. I couldn't believe he had sold our house, abandoned his father, and sent me divorce papers without a second thought. My phone buzzed, jolting me out of my daze. It was George. Emma, come back. Need to talk, George said, his voice weak but urgent. I'm coming, George. I'll be there soon, I replied, my voice shaking. I got into my car and drove through the night, my mind a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and confusion. By the time I reached George's place, it was early morning. Exhausted, I walked through the door and saw George waiting for me, his eyes filled with concern. George, I don't know what to do, I stammered, feeling the tears welling up. I couldn't hold it in any longer and burst into tears right on his shoulder. He led me to the living room and helped me sit down. Tell me, what happened? He said, looking at me with those kind eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Matt sold the house, George. He said there's no place for me and that he doesn't care about you either. He sent me divorce papers. George's face hardened, a rare show of anger. I knew they were up to no good. What do you mean, George? I asked, wiping my tears. After my stroke, couldn't speak, they talked, in front of me. He began, his voice trembling with the effort. What did they say? I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. They planned everything. Told me they'd get your money, sell house, kick you out, George said, his eyes filled with pain. I stared at him in horror. They actually said that? How could they be so cruel? Thought I couldn't understand. But I did, he continued, his voice getting stronger. They also wanted to get rid of me. Sell my house. Tears streamed down my face as I listened. I can't believe they'd do this to their own family. George took a deep breath. I've taken care of everything. What do you mean? I asked, looking at him, confused. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys, handing them to me. I bought Matt's house. It's yours now. I looked at the keys, then back at George, feeling a wave of emotion. You did this for me? Why? Because you deserve it. You paid for it. Not them, he said firmly. I burst into tears again, but this time they were tears of happiness and relief. Thank you, George. I don't know what to say. As I sat there, holding the keys to my new home, I felt a mix of gratitude and determination. George had given me a second chance, and I was not going to let Matt and Susan's betrayal break me. We were going to fight back, and we were going to win. Together. The next day, George decided it was time to make things official. He called a lawyer to the house to change his will. Emma, need you to be the heir, George said, looking determined. Are you sure, George? I asked, feeling a mix of gratitude and concern. Yes, it's right. You took care of me, not them, he replied, his voice steady, despite his condition. The lawyer arrived, and we sat down at the kitchen table. George explained his wishes, and the lawyer nodded, drafting the new will. I felt a lump in my throat as George signed the papers, making me the sole heir to all his property. A few days later, I met with Jack again, bringing all the documents and evidence we had gathered. Jack was impressed with the thoroughness of our preparation. Emma, this is solid. We've got everything we need to go after Matt and Susan, he said confidently. I'm ready to fight, Jack. Let's get that $200,000 back, I replied, feeling a surge of determination. Jack filed the lawsuit, demanding the return of my money. We also provided evidence from the bank, with witnesses confirming the transfer of funds. It was a strong case, and I felt hopeful about our chances. A few days later, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Matt and Susan standing there, looking desperate. Emma, we need to talk, Matt said, his voice shaky. I crossed my arms, glaring at them. What do you want? Please, Emma, we're sorry. We didn't mean for things to go this far, Susan said, her voice trembling. Sorry? You two planned this from the start. You lied, stole my money, and tried to kick me out. I shot back, feeling my anger rise. Emma, please, let's work something out. We don't want to go to court, Matt pleaded, his face pale. I shook my head, my voice cold. I don't want anything to do with people like you. And by the way, George has recovered and transferred all his property to me. You two are left with nothing. Matt's face turned ghostly white, and Susan's eyes widened in shock. She fainted right there on my doorstep. Matt just stood there, speechless. Get her out of here, Matt. I don't have time for your games, I said, pointing towards their car. He nodded, still in shock, and dragged Susan to the car. As they drove away, I felt a strange sense of closure. A few weeks later, the court ruled in my favor. I was awarded the $200,000, and the divorce was finalized. It was a long, hard battle, but I had won. I drove back to George's house, feeling lighter than I had in months. As I walked in, George looked up, his eyes full of curiosity. How did it go? We won, George. I got the money back, and the divorce is final, I said, tears of joy streaming down my face. We sat together in the living room, the weight of the past months lifting off our shoulders. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where we could finally find peace and happiness. Life had settled into a peaceful routine after all the chaos. I lived in my own house now, and George was a regular part of my life, like the father who passed away early and whom I hardly remember. We spent our days tending to the garden, chatting about old times, and simply enjoying each other's company. It was nice to have this calm after the storm. One sunny afternoon, as I was sipping coffee on the porch, my phone rang. It was Lily, my astrologer friend, who had introduced me to Matt. Hey, Emma. You won't believe what I found in your chart this time. Lily's voice was bubbling with excitement. I chuckled, already guessing where this was headed. Oh boy, what is it now, Lily? You've got a new love coming your way. He's perfect for you, even better than the last one. The stars don't lie, she said, practically squealing with joy. I burst out laughing, shaking my head. Lily, after everything that happened, I think I've had my fill of horoscope-based romances. But Emma, this one is different. The alignment is just right. You've got to trust me on this, she insisted. Lily, I appreciate it, but I'm focusing on myself for now. If Mr. Perfect is out there, he'll find me without the stars' help, I replied, feeling more amused than annoyed. After hanging up, I couldn't help but laugh at the whole conversation. Despite everything, Lily's enthusiasm was infectious. But I knew I was in no rush to jump into anything new. I was content with my life as it was. George wheeled himself onto the porch, looking curious. Who was that? Lily. She's trying to set me up with another perfect match from the stars, I said, rolling my eyes playfully. George chuckled, his eyes twinkling. Stars didn't work so well last time. Exactly. I told her I'm done with horoscope dates. I've got enough on my plate without adding a new guy into the mix, I replied, grinning. You'll find someone when the time's right, George said, giving me a knowing look. I looked out at our garden, feeling a deep sense of contentment. The flowers were blooming, and the vegetables were coming along nicely. It was a little paradise we had created together. You know, George, this is all I need right now. A simple life, good company, and a bit of sunshine, I said, taking a deep breath of the fresh air. Perfect life, he agreed, smiling. A few days later, I got another call from Lily, but this time it was just a chat. No horoscope predictions, no matchmaking, just catching up like old friends. It felt good to keep things light and easy. One evening, as I was watering the garden, I thought about what the future might hold. I knew that someday, I'd meet someone who would appreciate me for who I am, without needing the stars to tell us we were meant to be.